So it's the end of another week and another year. I made it home Saturday. My last load I delivered over there in Pelham, Alabama. Pelham, which is basically Birmingham. So let's just take a quick look. Last week I went from Appling to Appling. I was going to do another Amazon load. They canceled the trailer on me, gave me $175 right there. The next load I picked up in Peltzer, South Carolina, took it to St. Augustine, Florida. It had a second pickup over there in Middle Georgia, and I got $2,000 on that one. It paid $3.51 for the loaded miles. I had a 125-mile deadhead to go get it, so it was a total of 751 miles. With the deadhead, I got $2.68 a mile. The next load was Bloomingdale, Georgia. Took it to Wildwood, Florida. Bloomingdale is basically the Savannah area, so I deadheaded basically from Jacksonville back to Savannah. Picked up that wood load and got it $1,500 on 270 paid miles, which came to $5.56 a mile. With the 190-mile deadhead to go get it, I was at $3.14. And then the last load I picked up in Tampa, took it to Pelham, Alabama, got $22.50 on 545 paid miles, which that's what Google says it is. I had 101 miles from Wildwood to Tampa, so it's $4.13 per paid mile, and it came out to $3.49 with the deadhead, a total of $644. So for the week, if you take this number here, you'll see that it's the auto sum of these four loads. This right here, 7150, is the ending odometer for the week from the previous week's ending odometer. So that's 2170 all miles with deadhead, and that came to $2.73 a mile. Now, if you look up here to the top, this dark line was the end of last month. So if you take this number over here to the side, you take the ending odometer where I finished the last load up for the month, from the last load of the previous month, you'll see I did 5,300 miles for the month. I did $13,697, and that came out to an average of $2.58 a mile. If you take how many miles I drove divided, or how much I earned by how many miles, comes to 258, which is right here. Those two numbers right there. So how did the week, that's how my week fell. How did the end of the year go? Let's look up here to the top. Gross revenue. So right here, I've already filled out these columns. I want to know what I made for the year, what my gross expenses was, how many miles I did, what I averaged cents per mile on expenses. That's what I want to know. You can't never book your loads confidently without knowing what it's costing you to operate. So this average cents per mile. So the gross revenue up here. So we're going to hit auto sum over here on the top corner right here. Now we're going to come down here and click the bottom, hold the shift key down and scroll it all the way to the top. So now it's got the first load, everything in that column. You hit enter. I did $190,202. Gross expenses. Well, how do I know what my gross expenses are? It's of another program that I got called Microsoft Money. It's the same as QuickBooks or Quicken. There's dozens of different accounting softwares, but if you tab over here to my accounting program, you can see up here, this is broke down into 4 quarters. And this final column over there is what I did for the year. You can see I've got fuel. I did $49,000 in fuel. My truck payment was $36,541. Truck insurance was $12,528. Trucking expenses, that's the only category that is kind of a hodgepodge of miscellaneous stuff. It could be anything from a laptop to a desktop to a new, well, new phone wouldn't be in there because I already got a category called phone and internet, and I combined those categories. But I've got pilot cars. Everything else is pretty much its own category. But like I said, there's just one category that I have. Let's say I go to Walmart and I want to buy me a crock pot to try to cook in the truck. Well, that would be a expense that I could count off on taxes. So that would go under truck and expenses. Maybe I want to buy some new floor mats or some floor rugs for the floor, a new bedspread or a new pillow. All that would sort of fall under that category. Basically, it costed me $136,903. So you're going to go back over here, 136,903. So there we go right there. So now how many miles did I run? So we'll scroll back down here to the bottom again. And we'll take this ending odometer. So up here we'll hit all miles. We're going to hit equals because that starts the formula. You take this column here and then we'll hit the subtract key and then we'll go to the previous year. You see down here where it says 2023, these are all the previous years down here. So you go to 2023 and then the last load I did last year, I finished my last load last year. I went from Pendergrass, Georgia after Christmas and I finished my year up out there in Medford, Oregon. And there's the odometer right there. And you hit enter. So it says I did 84,477 miles. So my average cents per mile, that's what we want to figure out here, equals my gross revenue, divide that by the total number of miles, and there it is, $2.25 a mile this year to the hub. So if you look at another thing right here, I've already downloaded how many days I've worked last year. I just go into my logbook and hit create a report, driver report, since I'm the only driver it got. It says in there that I had 224 days of working time. So every day that I had a book. It could be a little bit more because there is days where I've taken off, like in Oregon and California, or somewhere getting a reset, like I might not have worked on Sunday, and the logbook won't count those days, even though it was actually theoretically a day that I was actually on the road. It just happened to be off with no time recorded, so the logbook counts it as a day off. But we're just going to go with what the logbook says. I don't feel like going through every single page and go, oh, I was in Buffalo for Sunday on this day. That's, I could probably add another 10 days, but I'm just going to go with the 224. So we're going to hit equals how much I grossed right there, how much my expenses was. My expenses was 136. We'll divide that by 224 days. So basically it tells me right there that my average cost per day was $611. And if you want to know how much it's costing me cents per mile, so now we've got cents per mile, cost of operation, cost of we can say equals how much my cost was for the year, divide that by how many miles I traveled, and did I do something wrong? No, I did the wrong column. Control Z equals that divide by that, $1.62 a mile. So based off of that, we can take the equals, the 225, and subtract that by the 162, and we're at 63 cents a mile to me as an owner operator. That's basically what I earned this year on average on 224 working days. And you can even break that down to how much that came out per day, which was basically, it wasn't too good. Let's look at what I did last year. If you look at 2023, I've already got those numbers up here as well. My gross last year was $192,000. I worked last year, my net earnings was $66,000. My total miles was $77,000. My gross cost of operation was $2.50 gross cents per mile. So last year I averaged a little bit more, 25 cents more per mile to the hub. my net last year, I cleared approximately 86 cents a mile, and my cost of operation last year was $1.64. So what I say my operation was this year, 2024, was $1.62. So that's where I always tell everybody my cost of operation is, I usually just round it up to the $1.65 just to make it an even, always round up then down, especially when you're trying to bid loads. And I'll show you one more thing over here under quick estimates. This is something that I built years ago. I've got this thing broken into about 1, 2, 3, 4 different sections right here. The first section up here is my cost of fuel per mile. So right now the average cost of fuel is $3.57 a gallon. My truck averages 6.3 miles to the gallon. And that puts the fuel cost at 57 cents per mile on average. Down here, let's say a broker calls me up. This is how many miles the broker says the load is, or Google says it is. So if I'm booking a load, and let's say it's 360 miles, and the broker's trying to pay, say, $7.50 off of that. So he's trying to pay $2.08 a mile. That gives me that number what he's trying to pay. Now, I can look over here, and I already know from basing it off of right here that my cost of operation is running me roughly $611 a day. And if you go back over here to this over here, you can see right there my fuel cost was $49,763. $49,763. So we'll do that. $49,763. This is my fuel. Type it in. And we'll take that, change that to a $sign currency. So now, how much did it cost me on average? If you take this right here, equals how much I spent, subtract this right there, enter, it's $87,140. That's how much I spent right there without fuel. With everything else minus the fuel was $87,000. So now how much was that per day? If you take equals how much I spent, divide that by, we already know that I worked 224 days, divide that by 224, we're at $389 a day. And other years, I mean, that number can fluctuate greatly, within like $389 this year. I think, what was it last year? I think last year my cost of operation was right here, $398. So last year was $398 without fuel, and this year was $389. So right around that $400 mark. Again, I just round that on up to about 400 bucks. So let's go back to that quick estimate sheet over here. And you see over there, I've got $411. Let's just raise that. We'll just say 400 just for kicks and giggles. I'll change that down. So if a broker calls me up on a Friday and says, hey man, I got this load, it picks up on Friday, it's 360 miles, it delivers on Monday. It depends on a lot of things whether I'll take that load or not. But I'm going to try to get paid for 2 days, Friday and Saturday, and then maybe Sunday I can take off. So if I know it's costing me on average $400 a day, I'm going to try to bill that truck out for 2 days of operation. It's Friday and Saturday. Technically it should be 3 days, but I'll, so if it costs me $400 for day 1, $400 for day 2, I know my fuel cost up here because it's taken right there. When I type that 360 in, it populates it right there. It says $204. That number translates over to here. So whether I work 1 day or 2 days, my fuel cost is going to stay the same. $204 for 1 day, and the second day is going to populate. My basic cost will be $400 for 1 day, add another $400 for the second day, be $200. Now me as a driver, I want to make $350 a day. So it goes $350 here and $350 again, so it would be $700. So now for 2 days, my basic cost would be $1,704. If I wanted to add 10% into it, it'd be another $170. So this green bottom down here is where I would quote at. Now this is kind of like a mixed thing because I'm just doing it for the weekend. But let's say it was just 1 day. Let's say it was on a Wednesday and I was delivering it on a Thursday. That same cost would populate $400 for my truck, $204 for fuel, $350 to me as the owner operator. Total costs without will be $954. If I wanted to add a 10% to it, so I could quote him $954 or the $95. If I quote him the $95 with the 10%, it would be $1,049, which would be about $2.92. And of course, if somebody called me and said they had that, of course I'm trying to add the deadhead into it too. So if I already Googled it and I know it's like 60 or 80 miles away, I would also add that in there. So I would say 360. I would go, okay, I'm just going to round that on up to 425. And then I would quote them $1,089, which would be 256. So I'd really probably come in a little higher. I would start at around, I'd ask them if they could do 15, see where they come back at. They might come back and say we could do 1,200. That's already a little bit above or right on target with what my quote would be. This little section right here and the section right here tells me another thing. 425 miles. If you drive 8 hours a day, you can cover about 400 miles in a day. That's a roundabout number. If you average it about 55 miles an hour, it'll take you about 8 hours to cover 400 miles. So I take this number right here and I take how many miles the load is, divide that by 58 miles an hour, and it tells me that it's 7.33 hours to drive. If I charge $125 an hour, it comes to $915. Dock time, an hour and a half to load and an hour and a half to unload. That comes to $195 for that. If you add these two lines together, you come out at $1,110. And if you notice, that's pretty darn close to about where this is at over here. And it also tells me down here, because it went over, if you take the 7.33 hours and you add 3 more hours to it, that comes to 7, 8, 9, 10.33 hours right there, 10.33. Well, there's only 8 hours in a day. So that's really taken 1.29 days to complete that 425 mile run. And I'm doing it that way because it makes me remember a regular job is regular time for 8 hours. If a load's going to go 10 hours, then that $125 over here, it just lets me know that that load is going to take 1.29 days or 10.33 hours to complete. And that's if everything goes pretty smooth with the run and there's no issues like long times at the shippers and long times at the receivers and so forth. But see, you've got right there around $1,100, around $1,100. So what about a load going to California? That's a completely different spectrum. So let's say from my house it's 2,450 miles to California, and a load broker calls me up and says he's got $5,000 in it. So he's trying to pay $2.04 a mile right there in that run to California. Down here at the bottom it says it's going to take 5.66. If you take the number of miles, it's going to take 45 hours and 25 minutes with the load time and delivery time. And of course, I didn't even count the couple times you got to stop for fuel going across the country. It's 5.66 days. Now I do know that I can run 2,400 miles. That's a 4-day run, but you're looking at 4 11-hour days to make it there in that, or at least 10 to 11-hour days. So we'll go up here to this column here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to cost me the $400 per day, 1, 2, 3, 4, $1,600 is what it's going to cost me for my truck. The fuel cost is going to be right there at $13.86. That rolls over to here, $13.86. All 4 days, the same price. That's not going to change. The driver pay is going to be $350 for 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I want to make $1,400 off that load for those 4 days, I need to quote at the very, very minimal $43.88. And if I want to get 10% into that, because let's say if I was leased onto a company and they were taking 10%, maybe you're leased onto a company and they're getting 20% or 24%. That would be where you would add that number in. But since other companies are adding that in or trying to cover that cost of them running their truck, I feel like, well, hey, why should I run it any cheaper? Yeah, I could run it for $43.88 and still make $1,400 on average. But why not try to get to 48, which would be $1.97? But if you notice over here, it's the 5.66. So you see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. why would I want to give extra days? I don't know. It's just, that's too cheap. Because $1.63, my average cost, if you look at what it's costing me per year back at that 2024 over here, you can already see that my average cost of operation was already running me $1.62 a mile. And that's what it has been for every year. If you go back into the same quick estimate over here, I've already built it in. I've already done the math on this down here. If you look at 2013 to 2023, my gross expenses was $1,585,800. And there was that number again. If you take it by the number of days that I operated each year, and I went back through my same logbook and I pulled the dates from every single year, and I added all the years up for those 10 years. It came out to $668 a day. Without the fuel, came up to $89,000 per year on average. And down here, my average cost per day was $600 a day and $1.44 a mile. So for 10 years, my average cost of operation was $1.44 and 89 cents a mile. So that's my numbers, and that's what they are. I can't fudge them one way or the other. That's all costs from everything, from pilot cars to purchasing trucks and trailers and insurance, everything. Even meals on the road are included in that. And I count the meals on the road. I don't do it this is bookkeeping for expenses. This isn't bookkeeping for taxes. I'll turn these numbers into my accountant at the end of the year, and they know that they can't count the food. Food's so they add that money back in. They know they can't count the truck payment because your truck payment it's not a write-off, only the interest and only the depreciation of the truck. So you go buy a brand new truck, it depreciates each year, and you get back about $35,000 in depreciation cost, which is about the same as the truck payment would be anyway. So it kind of is a wash. It's usually that last year, sometimes you might not get full depreciation on that 5th year or that 6th year. If you went 6 years or on it, if you went 7 years, you may not even get a depreciation that last year. So you got to kind of watch out. If you finance your truck for 7 years and your tax accountant lady only depreciates it over 5 years, those last 2 years you might have a $25,000 truck payment, and that's going to be money that you spent that you got to pay taxes on that you didn't get to keep. And that'll be about roughly 23% of that $25,000. So those, you got to kind of watch those things, and that's a whole different issue than what we're dealing with right here. We're just looking at what it's costing me to run my truck for an extended period of time, over 10 years, per year, per month, per week, and so forth like that. And like I said, we can look up here in 2024. I've got it what it costed me this ain't what it costed me, this is what I made. It kind of gives me a gauge week by week. And because I already know that it's costing me $1.63, $1.65 a mile on average to operate, that if I want to make 60 cents a mile, then I need to be at least what I did this year at the 225. You can see I made 225 a mile on average this year, and I averaged 63 cents to the truck. So hope that helps somebody out. So y'all have a good Christmas, and see y'all next year.